The power went out again. It happened just after midnight, that heavy silence after the hum of electricity dies. The kind that feels too complete. I was sitting in the small living room, scrolling through recordings from last week's night watch shifts. Strange reports had been piling up lately. A janitor seeing eyes in the hallway mirror, the old nurse hearing footsteps that stopped when she turned. I didn't believe any of it, not until I started hearing the same clicking sound through my headphones. It wasn't static. It was rhythmic. Click, 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 and then breathing. At first I thought it was feedback, but the breathing synced with something else. Faint, wet footsteps echoing from the corridor right behind me. I froze. The monitors showed only black. The flashlight on my desk flickered once, then went dead. "Stop playing around," I said, my voice shaking. The silence swallowed it whole, and then someone whispered from the darkness behind me, so close I could feel it on my neck. "I've been here the whole time." Every hair on my body stood up. The recording started playing by itself. A distorted voice looped over and over, whispering my own name. When the lights finally came back, the door was open, and the footprints leading out weren't mine. The next morning, the air still felt wrong, heavy, thick like it hadn't been changed overnight. I kept telling myself I'd imagined it all. The footsteps, the whisper, the looping audio. Maybe the building's old wiring had glitched. Maybe fatigue had twisted sounds into something else. But the footprints? Those stayed with me. I had photographed them before they disappeared. They were too long, too narrow, and spaced unevenly, like whoever made them didn't walk but dragged themselves forward. Half-melted heel marks, smeared with something dark that wasn't quite mud. The security office sat in the basement of St. Anthony's, a half-shuttered hospital that should have closed years ago. Half the lights didn't work. The walls sweated moisture even in winter. The upper floors were stripped bare, just long halls and silence. I'd taken the night shift job because it was quiet, isolated. A good place to think. I wasn't expecting to be afraid of the dark again. That morning I replayed the footage. Frame by frame, nothing but static. The timestamp froze at 12:14 a.m., right when the breathing began. Then the screen glitched and a single image flashed. For less than a second I saw what looked like a person standing in the corridor, head tilted, eyes wide open. But there was something off. Their shadow didn't match. It bent the wrong way. My hands shook as I paused the video. When I zoomed in, the pixels seemed to ripple, like the figure was still moving even in a frozen frame. A knock startled me. Hard sharp 3 times I turned. It was Nora, the only other guard who worked the morning rotation. Pale face, short hair, eyes that always looked half asleep. She leaned into the doorway. "You look like hell," she said. "Rough night?" Power went out again. "Some noise on the feed," I muttered. She frowned. "Don't start." "You know what happened to Calvin after he said the same thing?" I looked up. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Too long. He quit," she said finally, though the way her voice broke told me it wasn't the full story. "Didn't even come for his last paycheck. Said he heard someone breathing in the stairwell when he was alone." She forced a small laugh, pretending it was a joke. "Maybe this place really is haunted." Her tone shifted at the end, a nervous edge underneath the sarcasm. I smiled weakly. "Haunted's better than infested. I'll take ghosts over rats." But when she left, closing the door behind her, I caught her reflection in the small monitor's corner. For a split second, she wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. That afternoon, the maintenance man, Mr. Lang, stopped by. He was in his 60s, thin, with hands that always smelled of old oil and cigarettes. He didn't talk much except when drunk. That day he lingered longer than usual, eyes darting toward the dark corners of the basement. "You keep the lights on at night," he said flatly, without looking at me. "I try. Power's been cutting out." Lang's jaw tensed. "They don't like the dark broken." "What?" He looked at me then, eyes watery and unfocused. "When the dark breaks, when light cuts through, it remembers who did it." He turned and walked off, muttering something under his breath. I could only catch fragments, too long. Should have left. Not meant for this floor. That night I brought my own flashlight, a heavy-duty one, police grade. I told myself I'd finish one last shift, gather enough proof, then quit. I'd record everything, make sure no one could dismiss what I'd seen. At 11:58 p.m., the lights began to flicker. Just like before, 12:01, power out. The silence poured in again, like the building was holding its breath. I switched on my flashlight. The beam cut through a thin fog that hadn't been there before. Dust particles drifted, but they weren't floating. They were moving against the light, curling away like smoke. Then from the corridor came the sound. Click, 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 slow, wet, deliberate. I raised my flashlight toward the sound. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, its end fading into blackness. I took a step forward. The air felt colder now, not the kind of cold that prickles skin, but one that sinks inside your bones. My breath fogged even though the air was still. Something moved at the far end. Not fast, just a faint shift. Like someone leaning out of a doorway watching, I whispered, "Who's there?" The sound stopped. Then a voice echoed, barely audible, not from the hall, but from behind me. "You saw me." I spun around. Nothing. Only the hum of dying light bulbs above. When I turned back to the corridor, the flashlight flickered once. For a heartbeat, I saw the figure again. Tall, pale, its face stretched into something that might have once been human. Its eyes were open too wide, and its mouth hung slightly ajar as if mid-breath. And behind it, the darkness moved and are pulsing like it was alive. The beam sputtered out. A whisper crawled through the dark. "Keep watching, or it won't stop." The air snapped. The lights returned. The hallway was empty. My knees gave out. The clock read 12:14 a.m., the same minute as before. The following day, sunlight hit the cracked hospital windows like it didn't belong there. Weak, fractured, and already fading before it reached the floor. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that same clicking sound. Sometimes soft, sometimes loud enough to vibrate in my skull. I needed answers. Nora didn't come in for her shift that morning. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I walked the halls alone, every step echoing too long, like the building didn't want me there. By noon, I decided to dig into the old records. The main office still had the archived files stacked in dusty boxes marked Decommissioned Wing, 1997. That wing had been locked off for years, condemned after a fire in one of the psychiatric wards. The official report blamed faulty wiring, but the photographs, the few that hadn't been water damaged, told a different story. The walls were covered in something black, not soot, too thick, too patterned, like it had spread upward instead of falling. And there were shapes in it, human shapes. I turned one photo over. Written in faded ink were the words, "Do not disturb what stays in the dark." I felt a weight in my chest. Not fear exactly, but something heavier. Recognition. That's when the door creaked open behind me. "Shouldn't be in here," a voice said. It was Mr. Lang. His eyes looked sunken, darker than before. "Why are these files locked up?" I asked. He looked past me, toward the window, then back. "Because the dark never left this place," he said. "You think the fire burned it out? It only fed it?" "Fed it?" He nodded slowly. "They tried to treat a girl down there. Night terrors, they said. Wouldn't sleep, wouldn't open her eyes during daylight. When they forced her, she screamed until blood came out her ears." He swallowed hard, his hand shaking. "Said something was inside the dark, that it wasn't empty, that it watched her back." A pause, then lower. "They kept her in room 12. The same corridor your monitors cover." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Did she disappear?" he said. "One night the lights went out. When they came back, her bed was empty, and the nurse who opened the door wasn't right after. Said she heard breathing that never stopped." He turned to leave. "You stay out of that wing, you hear me? Whatever you see in those cameras, don't follow it." That evening, Nora still hadn't returned. The radio crackled but carried no sound. I sat alone in the control room, every monitor showing its dim, gray-tinted feed. Nothing moved. At 11:59, the static began again. The sound crawled up from the floor, through the wires. Then, one by one, the feeds went black, except for one. Camera 4. It was the hallway outside room 12. A door stood open. A dark shape stood beside it. I leaned closer. The shape shifted. A person standing too still, face hidden in shadow. I reached for the mic. "Nora?" No response. Then the shape tilted its head. It wasn't Nora. The camera shook, once, twice, before freezing completely. The sound in my headphones changed from static to whispering. Not words, not yet. Just breath. Then, layered between the gasps, came something faint but clear. "Why are you watching me?" I tore off the headset, heart hammering, eyes on the monitors. Every screen was black now, except the one showing my own office. On that feed behind my chair, something moved. I spun around. Empty. The air, though, it wasn't right. The shadows in the corner seemed deeper, thicker. I took out my flashlight and aimed it there. The beam hit the wall, and a second shadow, not mine, shifted out of sync. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged. My phone's screen lit up. A message. Unknown number. Coup. 14 a.m. "Don't turn on the lights." The flashlight sputtered out. The darkness swallowed everything, and in that black I heard it again. The clicking. Closer now. Not footsteps. Nails. Crawling. I slammed my hand on the desk, searching for the backup power switch. When the emergency lights finally buzzed on, they flickered through red and orange. Emergency mode. The floor beneath the corner was smeared. Long streaks like something had been dragged. The next day I didn't tell anyone. Not Lang, not the supervisor. I just stayed in my apartment, curtains drawn, unable to shake the image. Every time I blinked, I saw that face and pale, stretched, those two wide eyes. By evening, I couldn't help myself. I went back. St. Anthony's looked deserted. The sun was low, shadows long enough to look alive. I told myself I just needed one clear look, one proof. Then I could leave. The main entrance creaked as I pushed through. Dust motes floated in the dying light. The building seemed to breathe, walls expanding and contracting with faint groans. I walked past the old nursery wing, down the corridor toward the sealed section. The chain on the double doors had been broken. I hesitated. "Nora?" My voice echoed and came back wrong. Slightly delayed, like something repeated it. I stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. The smell hit next, metallic, sharp, like blood and burnt ozone. Room 12 was at the end. Its door stood half open. I lifted my flashlight again. The beam trembled with my hands. Inside, the walls were covered in black stains. But when I leaned closer, I realized they weren't stains. They were handprints. Hundreds of them, pressed into the paint. Long fingers, small fingers all reaching upward. Something whispered from the dark corner. "She's still here." I froze. "Who's that?" "She doesn't like the light." The voice was thin, childlike, and came from the shadows under the old hospital bed. I knelt down, flashlight shaking, trying to see. Two small eyes blinked back. The air turned to ice. "She's awake now." A sudden rush of cold wind blasted through the room, and the door slammed shut behind me. My flashlight flickered violently. Something crawled across the ceiling. Fast, silent. The walls shuddered. My light caught flashes of movement, limbs bending wrong, a pale hand dragging across the floor. Then a face appeared inches from mine, upside down, crawling along the ceiling. Eyes black as oil, mouth stitched into a grin. I screamed, dropped the flashlight, and stumbled back. When I grabbed it again and shone it up, the ceiling was empty. But there was something on the floor. A tape recorder. It clicked on by itself. "Don't follow the dark," whispered my own voice, recorded from last night's feed. I ran, down the hall through the stairwell, gasping. The walls seemed to stretch, each corner darker than the last. I could hear the thing following, the scraping of its nails against the tiles, the rhythm growing faster. When I reached the ground floor, I nearly collided with Mr. Lang. He grabbed my arm hard. "Where were you?" he hissed. "You opened that door, didn't you?" She was in there, a girl, "There's no girl," he snapped. "Hasn't been for 28 years. He stared at me, trembling. "It doesn't show you her, it uses her. That's how it comes through." "What is it?" I demanded. He shook his head slowly. "It's what's left when fear has nowhere else to go. They fed it darkness for decades. All the screams, all the dreams they took from the patients. It became something that watches, that waits. When the lights die, it finds the warmest body and starts over." He looked over his shoulder, whispering, "You brought it back." That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in my car, parked across from the hospital, but the clicking never stopped. It followed, faint, inside the static of the car radio, inside the wind. At 12:14, every light on the hospital's exterior flickered once, then went out. In the reflection of my windshield behind me, something moved. It leaned closer, just enough for me to see the outline of a grin. "You saw me." The night after the hospital went dark, I stopped pretending it was something electrical. Power failures didn't whisper your name. Static didn't breathe. Something had found me, and it didn't need walls anymore. For hours, I sat in my car across the street from St. Anthony's, engine off, headlights dead. The whole building loomed like a black tooth jutting out of the earth. Every window was dark except one. Room 12. A faint orange glow pulsed there like the flicker of a dying candle. I told myself to leave. To drive away, forget everything. But curiosity is a slow poison. It tells you one more look won't hurt. I stepped out into the cold, my shoes sinking into wet asphalt. The streetlight above me hummed once, then blew out. The darkness didn't wait. It felt alive, stretching toward me as I crossed the road. Inside, the air was thicker than before, the kind of dark that swallows sound. My flashlight trembled in my grip. Dust floated in its beam, moving like insects caught in syrup. The hospital greeted me with silence, long corridors yawning into black. The exit doors behind me clicked, locking. I swallowed. Hello? No answer. Only the faint hum of electricity dying somewhere deep in the walls. I moved toward the basement. Each step echoed too loud, bouncing off concrete that seemed to lean closer with every breath. The smell returned, metal and burnt wires. My light swept past a gurney half buried in dust. Something lay beneath the sheet. I stopped breathing. Slowly I lifted a corner. It was empty, but the sheet was warm. From behind me came a voice, all soft, trembling. "You came back." I turned. Nora stood at the end of the hall, pale, shaking. Her uniform was soaked, her eyes glassy. "Nora, Jesus, you're alive." She didn't move. Her lips quivered like she was whispering to herself. "Where have you been?" I asked. Her head tilted slightly and she whispered, "In the dark." The flashlight flickered. "You have to leave," she said, voice breaking into static. "It watches through you now. What are you talking about?" Her face twitched. For a second her eyes rolled back and her mouth opened in a silent scream. Then, clear as day, her voice layered with something else, deeper, wrong. "You broke the light." I stumbled back. "Nora, stop," but she stepped forward, and her shadow moved the other way. That's when the hallway lights exploded one by one. Pop, 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 plunging everything into black. I heard her breathing right next to my ear. It's always been here. My flashlight snapped back on, and she was gone. Only the sound of clicking remained. I ran for the stairs up to the first floor. The corridors looked different now, stretched, warped, as if the building itself was shifting in the dark. Signs hung backward, doors where there hadn't been any. I passed the security office. The monitors flickered to life by themselves, static swirling across every screen, except one. Camera 4. Room 12 again. On the feed, I saw myself standing outside that same door. But I wasn't there. I was watching me. The figure on the screen turned its head toward the camera. Slow, unnatural. Its mouth opened wide enough to split the jaw. "Come home." The monitors all went white. A single image flashed. A hospital ID photo. Mine. Beneath it, a new title. Patient 12. I stumbled backward, clutching my head. No, I'm not. But the walls around me were no longer the office. They'd changed. White tiles, padded corners, a single light swaying above. My reflection shimmered in the metal door window. I was wearing a hospital gown. The clicking started again, louder now. Surrounding me, I ran at the door, pounding. "Let me out!" "You are out." The voice came from behind me. I turned, and the darkness peeled open like a curtain. She stepped out. The girl from the files. Bare feet, tangled hair, eyes black and wet. Her skin shimmered like oil under a thin light. I froze. "You're her." "I was," she said softly. "Until they left me here. Until they turned off the lights. What do you want?" To finish what they started. The floor beneath us pulsed, breathing like a lung. The ceiling bent, dripping black water. She reached out her hand. "It's cold outside. Stay where it's warm." I shook my head, backing into the corner. "You're not real. You're dead." Her face split into a grin that wasn't human. "Then what does that make you?" The room fell away. The floor opened beneath me like a mouth. I plunged into blackness so thick it felt like falling through liquid. When I landed, I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was back in the security office, and except everything was reversed, mirrored, the monitors glowed red. Every screen showed the same image, my own face watching from every angle. In each one, I was smiling. "You kept watching," the whisper said. "Now it's your turn." I tried to smash the monitors. My fists went through glass, and what the images didn't break. They bled. My hands came back slick and red, but the blood wasn't warm. It was cold as ice. Somewhere above me, the intercom crackled to life. Mr. Lang's voice echoed, distorted, terrified. "Get out of there. It's using your reflection. Don't look at it." I spun toward the nearest window. Too late. In the glass, my reflection smiled back. Then it moved before I did. "We've been waiting." The reflection's hand pressed against the inside of the glass. Cracks spidered across the surface. I stumbled back as the lights overhead began to swing wildly. Every reflection in the room, the screens, the glass, the steel cabinet, all filled with that same grinning face. And they began to step forward. The air roared. The darkness surged out like a wave. My flashlight rolled away, its beam cutting through the chaos, until it hit something at the far end of the corridor. The girl again, standing beside a door. "Room 12. She raised her hand slowly and pointed at me. The door behind her opened by itself, spilling out a blinding white light. "Come home," she said again, her voice cracking, overlapping with hundreds of others. I stumbled toward her, hands shaking, vision blurring. My ears rang with whispers, voices overlapping, pleading, sobbing, screaming. As I stepped into the light, I realized it wasn't light at all. It was noise, white, searing noise. The hospital dissolved. The walls stretched into shadows, then into faces, in screaming, gasping, flickering like film. In the center of it all, the darkness moved like water, alive. Writhing, I could see them inside it, Nora, Lang, the janitor, the nurse, and all the people who vanished. Their faces floated like reflections under glass, mouthing words I couldn't hear. And then I saw her, the girl again, eyes empty, hand outstretched. "Take my place." I shook my head. "No, then you'll stay with us." She reached forward, and the shadows swallowed my arm. Pain like frost and fire burned through my veins. I screamed, but the sound came out silent. "You broke the light," the voices said in unison. Now the dark remembers. Everything stopped, the noise vanished. The air turned still. I was standing in the middle of the hospital corridor again, bright daylight pouring through broken windows. Dust floated lazily in the sunbeams. No sound. No movement. It was over. I stumbled outside, gasping. The sky was pale blue, birds circling above the roof. I checked my phone. It was 12:15 p.m. somehow. 12 hours had passed. The police came later that afternoon. They said the hospital had been condemned for over 20 years. No power, no security system, no living staff. They found the security office empty, except for an old VHS camera still recording. The tape ended at 12:14 a.m., right when the lights had gone out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt too close. My reflection in the window lingered half a second longer than it should have. I turned on every light in the apartment. Still, the shadows in the corners didn't move, and from somewhere deep in the static of the old TV, faint but unmistakable, came a whisper I'd heard before. "You saw me." I froze. My breath fogged against the screen, then across the glass my reflection smiled. Now keep watching. Morning light never felt right again. For weeks after that night I told myself I'd imagined it all. The whispers, the reflections, the girl. Trauma, exhaustion, stress, my mind trying to fill in the blanks. But the blanks never stayed empty. When I looked away from a mirror, I still saw movement at the edge of my vision. When I turned back, nothing. And sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself hearing that click, faint like nails on tile, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. I quit the security job officially 2 days after the hospital was demolished. They tore down St. Anthony's with bulldozers in silence. The company said it was a safety hazard, but no one argued. The locals didn't come to watch. Nobody ever does when something evil finally dies. Only I wasn't sure it had. On the last night before demolition, I drove out there alone. Couldn't help it. Curiosity again, that poison. The construction fence rattled in the wind, a single sign swinging loose. Authorized personnel only. I climbed over it anyway. The building was half gone. One wing already reduced to rubble, the rest skeletal. Hallways exposed, walls peeled back like the ribs of something once living. Dust hung thick in the air, glimmering in the moonlight. Where room 12 had been was nothing but an open cavity in the concrete. I stood at its edge, flashlight in hand, staring down at the crater. The beam landed on something that shouldn't have been there. Footprints. Too long. Too narrow, dragging. I felt my throat tighten. The flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled forward, its beam slicing across the broken floor, until it stopped on a shape in the darkness. A single hospital ID tag lay half buried in dust. I picked it up. The photo was faded, but the name was clear, Nora Hollis. Behind me, the wind died. You came back, a voice whispered. I turned, but no one was there, only the dark and stretching, waiting. I left the flashlight where it fell and didn't look back. For months afterward, I tried to rebuild life in fragments, new apartment, new city, daylight job. People said I looked better, calmer. Maybe I even believed it. But there were nights when I'd wake up to the TV flickering by itself, tuned to static. I'd hear my own voice whispering faintly through the speakers. Keep watching. The first few times I unplugged the television. After that I stopped fighting it. You can't outrun what follows you in silence. I started recording everything. The sounds, the flickers, the dreams. Every file ended the same way. With the timestamp 12:14 a.m., I told myself I'd go to the police, a psychiatrist, anyone who'd listen. But what would I say? The dark remembers me? My reflection moves when I don't? They'd call it trauma. Sleep paralysis, stress. But sometimes when I'm honest, I think they'd be right. Because the scariest part wasn't what I saw. It was how much of it felt like mine. When the lights went out in that hospital, I didn't just see something in the dark. I felt it recognize me. It's strange the things you start to notice after you stop pretending everything's fine. Light, for instance. You realize how fragile it is, how it hums faintly like a heart beating, how even a single bulb makes you believe you're safe. But safety is an illusion. The dark isn't the opposite of light. It's what's left after light leaves, and sometimes it doesn't leave empty. A year passed. I moved again, smaller place, fewer windows. I kept all the lights on every night until the bills nearly bankrupted me. Didn't matter. I'd rather go hungry than sit in darkness again. Still, every power outage felt personal. Every flicker of light sent a shiver down my spine. One night during a thunderstorm, the inevitable happened. Blackout. No hum. No warmth. Only the slow crawl of silence that followed. My phone flashlight cut through the dark in thin ribbons. I told myself not to panic. Just the grid down. Nothing else. But then the radio on the shelf, dead for months, buzzed to life, static whispering through the speaker. A faint voice emerged, broken and distant. It's cold where you left us. I froze. My breath came out in sharp clouds. You broke the light, it said. You let it in. The flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. Something moved in the dark. Not fast. Slow, careful. The sound of nails clicking across the wooden floor. Click, click, click. I stood there, too afraid to breathe. The air pressed against my skin, heavy, damp. Then through the darkness, a faint orange glow bloomed from the corner of the room. The same color I'd seen in room 12. I whispered, "No. No, you're gone," a soft voice answered. "You saw me." The glow brightened just enough for me to see the outline of a face in the reflection of the window. Not behind it, but inside it, it smiled. Morning came somehow. I was still standing, still breathing. But the reflection didn't fade. Now every mirror in the apartment shows something just slightly off. A shadow where none should be. A face looking a fraction late to move. I cover them all now. Sheets, paint, anything to keep the glass from catching light. Still I can feel it. The weight of being watched. Not by someone. By something that remembers. A few weeks later, I received a letter. No return address. The handwriting was careful, childlike. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, aged, edges curled. It showed a hallway. Room 12's door at the end. In the corner of the image, barely visible, was a figure. Me. Written across the back in faded ink were 4 words, "Do not break the light. Now I keep candles burning at night." The flame dances, whispering against the dark, and I tell myself that means I'm still here. But sometimes, just before the wick burns low, I swear I see another shadow in the room. Long, thin, watching, and every so often when the candlelight flickers, the air shifts. A voice sighs from somewhere behind me. "You brought it with you. They demolished St. Anthony's, but they never buried what was under it. The foundations still stand, cracked and breathing. People say the construction crew refused to work nights after one of their men vanished between shifts. Maybe they'll build something new there. A mall, an apartment block, a school. Somewhere full of lights. For a while, it'll be fine. Then one night, the power will flicker. The silence will deepen. And someone will hear it. That faint, wet click in the dark. Maybe they'll ignore it. Maybe they'll check. Either way, it will already be watching. I used to think fear was about what hides in the dark. The unknown. The things that stare back. But the truth is worse. Fear is realizing the dark remembers you. That once it learns your name, it never forgets. Now when the lights go out, and they always do, eventually, I don't move. I don't breathe. I just listen. Because somewhere, close enough to touch, a voice always whispers the same words, "Keep watching," and I do, every time. Because the moment I stop, the dark moves closer.